Hey y'all, welcome. Looks like, or is there? You're saving this. Okay, she's coming. Okay, yeah.
Not that fortunate.
No worries.
Welcome. This is a great turnout. So thanks for having us, and thank you so much for letting me chat with you. This is a privilege.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So your book has been out for what is it, 9 days now? Is that?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It probably feels like 90 days and 9 hours all at the same time.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. You know, I think that it's just been so awesome. Well, to have events like this and see so many people I love and so many people who are excited about the book, and really just to already meet readers who are responding to the book and to the women in the story. I just feel totally blessed and honored right now. And it's, the Jewish New Year is starting this weekend, and it just feels like an amazing way to go into this period of transition as well. Yeah.
And what did you do on Pub Day?
Okay, so last Tuesday, well, first of all, I knew that the Reese book club pick was coming, and I knew that it was big, but I didn't really know what it was going to feel like. And that morning, to open my phone and see this video from Reese Witherspoon talking about how much she loved the book, how much she loved, especially the character who was inspired by my mom, was just really moving. And I mean, to feel just like this deluge of energy coming through my phone and on the street in my little town where I live. And so on the day that the book came out, I did a podcast interview. I did some handstands with a friend, and I had a completely distracted dinner with some people I love. And then we had a release event at my hometown bookstore, which is Bookshop Santa Cruz. And it was just such a blast. And my mom was there and my daughter was there. And, this is a 3-generation book. And so it's so awesome to have the 3 generations there. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very nice. And well, yes, the Reese pick.
Yeah.
Amazing. How long have you known about that?
I found out the day before my birthday this summer. And last year, the day before my birthday is when we sold the book to William Morrow. So I feel like all my birthdays are ruined now. And I was in this really remote cabin in Washington State where my husband's from. And I was actually pitting cherries. And I was listening to Demon Copperhead, on audio. And then a call comes in from a number I don't know, this 917 number. And I probably, if I hadn't been listening to an audiobook, I probably would not have taken the call. I probably would have thought it was spam. But it was my editor, and she said, "Are you sitting down?" And I was like, "Well, I'm pitting some cherries. I don't know." And she said, "What I'm going to tell you is going to change your life." And I was like, "I hope this is a good thing." And so it was just an amazing surprise. And you know how it is that being a debut novelist, it can be so hard to see something like this, to have people come out and be excited and curious about a book by somebody they don't know. I know that happened for you with Jenna Bush and the Today Show, and just like that feeling that my immediate sense was just gratitude, and also a sense that just, the story that I created with my mom was really going to be able to reach people, and I just feel really blessed by it. So yeah,
it's pretty special because as a debut, you definitely don't get the promotional dollars that other books have. You don't have kind of that built-in audience who knows your name, and so to have a celebrity shout out your book and share about it, and that they love it, is amazing. So congratulations.
Well, and I just also want to shout out that the Reese Book Club people are here tonight. Melissa and Jane and Gretchen and Justine. And they're so supportive. And I wonder, Erin, if you could open the door for those 2 ladies who, they can totally come in, and they should. And they might decide they're schwitzing and they're not sure, but hello, welcome. But I mean, just such a genuine, wonderful embrace from the Reese Book Club team. And really, I can't believe the conversations I've had with readers because of this, women who've come up to me at book events and have said, "Oh my gosh, I stopped reading when I had my twins, but my sister and I have gotten back into reading through Reese's Book Club, and we're so excited." Or, meeting nurses who talk about some of the elements of the story that really speak to them, and just seeing the power of this group of mostly women, but readers who are just so enthused and really feel connected. It's just been beautiful.
Yeah. Cool. Why don't we hear about the book? Can
Sure.
you give us a little plot summary?
Yeah, so Mother-Daughter Murder Night is, I like to call it a big-hearted mystery. It's about 3 generations of women. There's a grandma, a single mom, and a teenage girl, and they all have to work together to solve the murder of this naturalist who washes up outside their doorstep in the Monterey Bay in Elkhorn Slough. I grew up in Los Angeles, and but now have lived for 16 years up in the Santa Cruz Mountains in the Monterey Bay. And this book really started from, a terrible situation and a phone call I got 3 years ago when I found out that my mom had stage 4 cancer. And it changed my life. I quit my job and moved down to LA to be with her and to support her. And so many of my friends during that time said, you'll never regret the time you spend with your mom right now. And that was absolutely true. But what they didn't say is, that time is not always fun or joyful or even necessarily always loving, and it's certainly not easy. And I think that what happened for us was we ended up spending so much of our time talking about cancer. We spent so much of our time in doctor's appointments and trying to figure out what was going on. And we needed an escape. We needed a distraction. We needed something that could bring us some hope. And my mom and I both always loved murder mysteries. And so one day I turned to her and I said, what if I tried writing a murder mystery with someone like you as the lead detective? And that's really where this book is born. So, in this book, right in the beginning, a tough, feisty Jewish businesswoman in Los Angeles gets cancer and is forced to move up to the Monterey Bay in with her daughter and granddaughter in this ramshackle cottage in this nowhere town. And I should say at this point that while my mom is very tough and very strong and she's doing great, she's not nearly as outrageous as the grandma in this book. But that was sort of intentional. I wanted to write this character, Lana Rubicon, as kind of a superhero version of my mom. At a time when we were getting pushed around by doctors, I wanted to write somebody who was pushing doctors around. When my mom was stuck in bed, I wanted to write a woman who was leaping out of bed to try and solve this murder. And so it's really a love letter to my mom and a testament to her strength. And that's where this book comes from.
Well, I think the best part of this story, which I'm sure is good, is the fact that your mom's here tonight.
Heck yeah, absolutely. No, I'm thrilled about that. And just every step, you asked how is it with the Reese pick. One of the very first things I asked was, can I tell my mom? Because I knew it was a big secret. And just every time something good has happened for this book, when we found out it was going to be published, when we found out, Aaron Kaplan, who's here, when he optioned the book and I could call her and say, Mom, they're going to try and make it into a show or a movie. Every one of those moments for us has been just, again, that opportunity to escape into joy out of something that we did not choose and that was very hard.
Yeah. Well, so we have the 3 main characters. And I shared a few of the questions that I wanted to ask, but this one just came to me.
Yeah.
So, it's similar to one of the ones that we talked about. They're very different. Yeah. So can you maybe just in telling us what they might be wearing on a Thursday, that might show a little bit about their different personalities. So what might they be wearing
on a Thursday?
Right,
okay, if they walked in here right now, hi Tim, welcome. If they walked in here right now, Lana Rubicon who's the grandma, would be dressed to the nines, which, by the way, I know nothing about dressing to the nines. When I was working on this book, I would literally Google, what are shoes? I didn't know what. This is my nicest outfit, and it came from Goodwill. But Lana Rubicon would be wearing something by a designer who I don't know, and would be wearing razor sharp stiletto shoes for sure. Jimmy Choos play a key role in an action moment in this book. Her daughter Beth might be getting off work as a geriatric nurse, so might be in her scrubs. But if it was, Thursday night and she was off, probably jeans and her old bomber jacket. And then Jack, or Tiny, the 15-year-old, always in a hoodie. She is a real adventurer. She's a kayak tour guide, and so she's very outdoorsy. And what I wanted to do with these three women was represent different ways that women can be strong. Because I think that sometimes we have this idea culturally that there's only one kind of strong woman. And I think that in my life, and I'm sure so many of our lives, we know women who are strong because, like Lana, they're putting on their power suit and charging into the world of men. But we also know women who are strong because they're caregivers like Beth, and they're able to, put love into the world. And we also know women who are strong because they're adventurers like Jack. And I think that I wanted to write a story that was not about one strong woman and her followers, but was about 3 generations of women who are all engaging with strength in different ways and who are really negotiating. How can we love each other? How can we live in the same house without killing each other? How can we support each other and still be our full selves and still wear our Chanel suits and our bomber jackets and our hoodies and feel like even if we would never wear what the others are wearing, that we can love them and we can be a team.
Yeah. Really nice. So setting plays a big role in your story. Lana has to move up with her daughter and granddaughter to Elkhorn Slough.
Yeah.
So slough is one of those words where I've seen it a few times and I've never said it out loud. And so right now I went to Google and I'm like, is it slow? Is it slough? And so now I'm very familiar with slough, and I'm from, I was just telling Nina I'm from Stockton, California, and I'm like, wait, I think we have sloughs. I'm like, oh, all this time, that's what this was.
Yeah.
This was a slough.
Yeah.
So, and there, we get these great descriptions of nature and just as the backdrop, and it's, sometimes you hear people say that setting is a character, but in a way, the setting is very important to really everything that happens in the story. So is that one of the reasons why you picked this as a backdrop? It just seemed like suited for a murder mystery, or also the familiarity with it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly as a debut novelist, I felt most confident writing about places I know. I did, though, strategically choose Elkhorn Slough, which is about 30 minutes south of where I live, because I live in not a huge town, and I didn't really want people in the grocery store accosting me about how I was describing where I live. But Elkhorn Slough is also very special because it is a National Marine Preserve. It's actually the second biggest marine preserve on the West Coast after the San Francisco Bay. And it has this really unusual quality that it is a beautiful place full of wildlife. You go there, you will see otters, you'll see pelicans, you'll see sea lions. But it also, all of that wildlife is right up against urbanity. Highway 1 runs right through it. There's a railroad right through it. There's a functioning marina. So it's both industrial and wild. It's both human and animal. And I always feel like with a mystery, any place that's sort of on the border of things has conflict baked in. And a lot of the mystery, the source of the mystery is really about land politics, which, as we all know, wherever you are in coastal California, is a huge source of conflict and power. And so I wanted to place it somewhere that I find both very beautiful and healing, but also a place that could be a little spooky and where there might be some inherent conflict. And I wonder if I could read just a little bit. Okay, so just to give you a sense, this is, so in the very beginning of the book, Lana Rubicon, becomes sick and is forced to move up to the Monterey Bay. I should also note that I was never able to get my mom to move to San Francisco. But it turns out in fiction, you can just make people do things. So, okay, I'll read from this part. After 2 hours crawling through city traffic, they left the sprawl of Los Angeles. They wound up a mountain pass lined with citrus trees, Beth's Camry chugging uphill as the stars came out. Lana shut her eyes at the first vineyards, and Beth drove on in silence, watching the rolling hills give way to the inky Monterey Bay. Even in the dark, the ocean made itself known, waves roaring onto rocks, spraying salt and mist over the bridge that separated sea from strawberry fields. Beth's house was perched between ocean and farmland, on a tiny strip of gravel and sand above Elkhorn Slough. Beth loved the way the wetland shifted with the tides, rising and falling like a lover's breath below her house. When she first moved in 15 years ago, she'd seen Elkhorn as a temporary refuge. But she'd grown to relish its foggy mornings and wild treasures, soft where Los Angeles was hard, scruffy where the city was slick. That's a Freudian slip, yeah. As Beth walked her mother to the door, she resisted the urge to point out the driftwood planters she carved and filled with succulents, the wreath of bracken fern she braided herself. She steered Lana to Jack's bedroom, bracing for her mother to pronounce her verdict on the secondhand furniture, the nicked floorboards, the peaty smell of the slough wafting up from outside. I should also say, reading this, it's a little nerve-wracking tonight because the narrator of the audiobook is here. And she did a wonderful job. I am like contractually obligated to tell you that it is fabulous if you buy a hardcover, but I will also tell you that the audiobook is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, it's so easy because you wrote such a fabulous story, great characters.
Thank you.
It's easy.
I bought the audiobook
Nice.
as well. And really, really nice job.
Thank
And so you're reading really, again, the writing is just very sensual, and you really do paint a picture of what this specific area looks like. Did you have to do a lot of research aside from just being in a place that you're familiar with?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time. Actually, I before I started working on this book, when my mom got sick, I was usually down here in LA, but when I'd go home, going out and paddleboarding on Elkhorn Slough was a real source of peace and calm for me. So it became a place, and it was a place actually I think my mom discovered first. She went hiking there before I'd ever been, and so it was a place that I could just kind of ground with myself and with nature, but also feel connected to my mom. And so when I started working on this story, it felt like a great place, a place I knew I'd want to spend more time doing research. And one of the beautiful things about being from a small town is that, you know, the mystery at the center of this book takes place on a ranch right north of Elkhorn Slough. And I was talking to a friend up in Santa Cruz about this book, a wildlife ecologist, and I'm explaining this ranch, and he said, "Oh, you mean Wally's ranch?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You know, the ranch you're describing, that's owned by Wally." I'm like, I invented this ranch. And he said, no, there's a guy who owns exactly the ranch you're talking about. And he calls this guy, and 2 weeks later, I'm out horseback riding with Wally over his, and actually there's some historical documents about the history of conflict over this ranch in the book that are real historical documents that this guy Wally gave me. So I did do a lot of research out in the place. It's also something my mom really helped with. She got a book of Elkhorn Slough flora and fauna, and I'll always remember the day she called me from chemo, and she was like, "Nina, there is a poisonous frog who lives in the slough. Maybe kill somebody." And then her voice just drops, and I was like, "Mom, did I lose you?" She's like, No, the nurses heard me and they're getting alarmed, so I need to stop talking. So my mom helped a lot with the research as well. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, so you shared about your inspiration and how going through this really challenging situation with your mom kind of pushed you to write this. But maybe tell us a little bit more of how you go from that to actually writing this book, and you know how else your mom was involved in the process. Was she reading the whole way?
Yeah.
Was she always like sending you different ideas and notes? And
Yeah, there was a lot of all of that. So, right, so, you know, this started really from that initial impulse just to find a distraction and find an escape. And we spent a lot of time before I ever wrote anything just idly chatting about these imagined characters. And what would this be like? And, you know, I always think about, there's this poet, Donald Hall, who was married to Jane Kenyon, who was also a poet. And after Jane Kenyon died, he wrote this beautiful essay called The Third Thing. And he talked about this idea that in any love relationship, we don't spend most of our time gazing into the eyes of the person we love. We spend most of our time engaged around a third thing. You know, whether it's kids or a pet or a sports team you love or an art form you love. And I think that we had really found that cancer unwittingly had become this uninvited third thing. And so at first, just imagining the idea of a book, the idea of a murder mystery, became for us this new place we could focus. And then I started actually writing. And in the beginning, I would sit on my mom's bed in the morning. I love getting up early. And I would just type, and I would just try and write scenes that would make her smile. And when she'd wake up, I'd sort of slide the laptop over, I'd make her a cup of tea, and then I'd go make breakfast, and then I'd come back and we'd talk about it. And every single scene in this book my mom read first, usually the same day it was written. And my mom gave a lot of ideas, but actually was the perfect kind of first reader because most of her ideas were either very small, like, you need to fix this typo, or she wouldn't wear Chanel, she would wear, I don't even know, something else that I don't know. And, but then the other thing that my mom did every day was just encourage me, just say, keep going, what happens next, let's talk about it more. And also, as a writer, often we can be it can feel so lonely, and to have somebody who's encouraging you, but who also, anytime you call and say, would you read this for the 87th time, please? Would say, yes, absolutely. And then when I'd say, could you read it in the next 2 hours? She would say yes. And she had nothing, right? She says she has nothing to do. My mom was an unbelievable businesswoman for so long. If there's something Simon women know how to do, it's how to work. And so it was a joy to get to do this together. And I would say even once we sold the book, when the editor and the publisher would want more edits, she became very indignant. She was like, it's good enough, let's get this so just always a cheerleader for the book. And, on a more serious note, we were really nervous for a while. And, one of the big things for me was like, I wanted this book to come out while we were both here. And as it turns out, my mom's doing great and we get to really enjoy this, but we didn't know what was going to happen. And so, this became a kind of lifeboat for us.
So we got more books to write together.
Yeah.
So we learned really quickly that Lana, the grandmother, her comfort space is she'd probably be comfortable in this area. She likes Santa Monica, shopping or the businesses here, but she's forced to move up north and live with her granddaughter and her daughter. So 3 women who are very different living in the same house. In my book, I kind of have a similar dynamic where you have generations of women living, trying to live together. I have 4 daughters, God bless my husband. Trying so many different personalities trying to live together. So is there something that you wanted to explore with mother-daughter relationships? And maybe there's a passage related to that you would like to read?
Yeah, I think, I love this also about Black Handle women having, in your case, 4 generations of women together. And I think that I wanted to explore this question of can people who love each other but are very different, and who have had a rift, because in the beginning, Lana and her daughter Beth, have really not spent very much time together for many years. Can they negotiate their way to a loving relationship without having to change who they are? Can they really get to know and respect each other? And in particular, I was really interested in this idea about women's strength and the ideas around independence and interdependence. And I think that a lot of people, during the pandemic have been thinking about interdependence, sometimes for the first time, sometimes it's been critical. But I think that Lana really sees strength as being about being able to do everything yourself. And Beth really sees strength as being able to support each other. And I think that, to be honest, as I was writing this book, I was processing my own kind of evolution from feeling like Alana, being somebody, when my mom got sick, she, myself, and my sister were all CEOs of organizations. And she actually called and she said, I need to have emergency brain surgery, but don't come. I know how busy you are. We all love each other, but we were all very independent. And I think that working together to support her and to support each other taught us about the power of interdependence. And so a lot of me writing this was about processing and learning to love the Beth inside of me, which is not necessarily somebody I'd identified with before. And I'll read a little bit just to give you a sense in the beginning of what Lana and Beth's relationship is like. So this is actually before they leave. This is when Lana calls. Actually, Lana does live in Santa Monica. But when Lana calls, I wanted her to live in the marina, but there's a marina in the book in Northern California. And I felt like people outside of California would just be like, there's too many marinas. So this is when Lana calls her daughter to ask her for help. Beth, listen to me. They're saying I've got tumors, lots of them in my brain. that I need surgery right away. But you should see the shoes this doctor is wearing. I mean, how can he expect anyone to take him seriously? Beth's face froze in a half smile. Wait, slow down. Where are you? Are you okay? Besides being held hostage by a radiologist who can't be bothered to brush his own hair, I'm fine. I'm at City of Angels Hospital. They say I can't check myself out, that someone has to take care of me. I need to get to a better facility, one with real doctors in decent suits. So the non-question hung in the air. If Lana had ever asked for Beth's help before, she couldn't remember it. Demanded her attention? Sure. Assumed her acquiescence? Constantly. But needed her help? Valued her expertise? If Beth weren't so worried, she'd mark the day on the calendar with a gold star. Ma, of course I'll come. Silence. Lana was never silent. For a moment, Beth pictured her mother in a hospital bed, alone, maybe even afraid. It was hard to imagine. Beth spoke in her most confident voice. Dr. K retired, but I know the charge nurse in neurology at Stanford. It's one of the best neurosurgical facilities in the country. I'll make a call. Can't we do it at UCLA? There was the prima donna she'd grown up with. Beth knew it would be useless to remind her mother that she too had a life, a job, and a child. Instead, she responded in language Lana could understand. Ma, this is brain surgery. Let's get you the very best. Stanford? Stanford. I'll take care of it. I'm going to skip a minute. Lana's voice shot back through the phone. Stanford, fine. But I'm staying in a hotel. Ma, you can't be alone while you're recovering from brain surgery. I hardly think I'll recover in a shack that's about to fall into a mud pit. Beth closed her eyes and resisted the urge to throw the phone. It's not your condo. It's not LA. But it's nice. I promise. There was a long pause during which Beth presumed Lana was contemplating the many ways her daughter's shabby house in backwater town fell short of her minimum requirements.
I think a lot of us can relate to that as we get older. Get in situations where we have to hand over control, acquiesce to others, ask for help. It can be hard. So I really felt connected. I felt connected to all three of the characters in some different ways, but I definitely related to that for Lana.
Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of women who talk about the feeling of invisibility that starts to creep up as you get older. And I think that Lana is somebody who is really using all of her power to resist that. And I think that when she becomes sick, she's not just losing her health, she's also losing her agency and her sense of control, which, as you're saying, is, I mean, I think something that is profound for any of us to deal with, especially somebody for whom control has been so much how she's defined what a successful life is.
So as do many of us, these women enjoy a good thriller. So much so that Jack and Beth have a standing slasher movie night. A lot of fun. So I don't think it's a spoiler. Well, you've already shared that one of these women, the teenager Jack, happens upon a dead body, and that's what kind of gets the ball rolling with the story. So they have they get their own murder night. Can you read a bit from when Jack finds the body?
Yeah. I'm going to read right after it because I don't want to gross anybody out too much. But I think this will also give you a sense of Jack, who is, 15 and is very adventurous and is looking to stretch herself, but also obviously when confronted with something so surprising, is reeling a little bit as well. After a stunned, and I guess I should say comes upon this dead body, a father and son on a kayak tour she's leading, come upon the dead body, and then she comes and ascertains that yes, in fact, it is not a tourist who has just taken a little dip, but it's something much more serious than that. After a stunned moment in her boat with her head between her knees, Jack snapped into efficiency mode. She had responsibilities. She radioed the Coast Guard, then wrangled the father and son to rejoin the group. She did a count. Everyone on her tour was there, and they were going back to dry land now. The dead guy was on the bank, and he wasn't going anywhere. The father looked nauseous, the son a spinning top of adrenaline and fear. But Jack kept her voice calm and firm, and they followed her directions. Jack led the group back to the kayak shack in a ragged line, her paddle churning through the water like a quiet, determined dishwasher. The tour group passed under the highway and across the chopped-up ocean. News spread from boat to boat in whispers and heads whipping around to look back, as if to accuse the slew of ruining their day. The boats approached the shore. Travis was on the boat lounge ramp, waving his arms like a girl at a drag race, too smiley by a mile, and Jack realized she hadn't called Paul or told anyone at the shack what had happened. As far as everyone at the marina was concerned, this was just another group of tourists to unload. She shot a glare at Travis, who was trying to tease a smile from the older woman along with her paddle. He didn't get it. Jack hauled her kayak up and stomped over to him. Travis, you are not going to believe this. What's up? We found a body, a dead person in the slough. Can you get Paul on the phone and tell him to come down here? I'll close the group out. Whoa, are you? Just go. Now, please. Jack's grandma had told her it was always good to give men simple instructions in complicated situations.
Very nice. Well, I want to make sure that we have time for all the wonderful people who have showed up here to ask questions, but I just want to do a little round of something that I do with these chats called Fun and Fast. So these are just quick and dirty. So hardcover reader, paperback, or e-reader?
All three. My favorite to read is paperback. My favorite to gift is hardcover. And if I'm traveling, I'll do e, but it's not my favorite. Yeah.
What is your favorite either slasher movie or murder mystery?
I mean, I can't handle serious scares. So the women in this book love Columbo. I'm a big Columbo fan. I'm a big Inspector Morse fan. So some of the more, and Miss Fisher. I love Miss Fisher. More on the fun, lighthearted, the detective bringing it together and all is right with the world. Less on the dark, and certainly not on. There are no cut up bodies in this book, and there will never be cut up bodies. Well, I can't say never, but I don't intend at this time to ever cut a body into a lot of different places.
Quiet or music or other sounds when you write?
I do this weird thing where I pick one song and I listen to it on repeat so much that it becomes not a song for me anymore. It ruins the song. So you have to pick a song that you don't want to have in the rest of your life, but it kind of becomes meditative for me.
And do you have a favorite writer?
Right now, one of my absolute favorites is this spy novelist from the UK named Mick Herron. He writes, actually, Slough House, Slow Horses has become an Apple TV show. The books are amazing. They are so dry. They are so funny. They are so sharp. He was a poet before he wrote novels, and it really shows in his writing.
Now, you already said that you kayak, right?
Paddleboard.
Paddleboard.
Yeah.
Why am I thinking
No problem.
paddleboard? Anything else sporty or fun or that you do that's similar to the women in your book, or
I'm actually a huge jock, so I
Okay.
toned it down a lot for this book. Although there's a lot of kayaking in this book, and my mom and I famously can only go in circles in a kayak. So, but I love to swim in the ocean. Actually, that's my favorite way to be in the water. Yeah.
And the last question, I had written this question down before I learned that your book got optioned. So I was going to see if you had dreamcasted any of the characters.
No, I'm really welcoming people's ideas about this because I'm not a huge TV or movie watcher. I will say that the main character, Lana Rubicon, when I first wrote her, I wrote her to be my mom's age. And then my mom said, no, she's got to be younger. And so we made her 62 when I submitted it for agents. And then my agent said, we've got to make her younger. And she wanted her to be in the 55 to 58 category. And I looked up all these famous actresses online. And at the time, Sandra Bullock was 57. And I was like, there's no way that Sandra Bullock can get aged out of someday playing Lana Rubicon. There's a lot of physical humor in this book. And I just think of her as a great physical comedian. But I welcome all ideas and I'm happy to bring them to the producers. I'm sure they'll just sort of smile and nod, but they get paid to do that, so that's fine. And so any ideas you have, do you have any ideas? Casting ideas?
For Ramirez, I had a picture in my head, but because I picture a cop on another show
Sure.
that I watch.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she would be good, but she probably doesn't want to be typecast. I don't know.
As a Latina couple,
Right.
yeah, that's funny, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can open it up for questions.
So, you mentioned about the three characters having to, first of all, take your mum out of Santa Monica.
Yeah.
And then, and the three characters having to learn to be themselves but live together. So, if you had to describe in 3 words each of the characters and then one through line that connects them all, what would they be?
Yeah, okay. Lana, I would go with relentless. Beth, I would go with romantic. And Jack, I would go with adventurous. And I think the through line with all of them is strength, no question. And one of the interesting things about writing the book is it's all in third person, but I use each of their point of view. And one of the challenges I had as a writer was thinking about how do they see a scene differently from each other. So Lana is, she makes a lot of snap judgments about people. She is always driving towards her purpose. The reason I use romantic for Beth is not because there's romance in this book, but because Beth sees the natural world. She sees the people around her in terms of kind of beautiful possibility. And I think of that as a romantic way to see the world, even when she's dealing with hard things. And then Jack, is at 15 itching for a bigger adventure than the small town that she's in and the body of water that's available to her. And so I think of all of them as being connected by being strong, and that's ultimately what leads them to be able to really see each other. But they all have a very different perspective on the world. Great question. I haven't heard something like that before.
Other questions?
What's next?
What's next? I've been writing a couple of different book twos. This process has happened much quicker than I expected, which is amazing. And so I've had the opportunity to start working on some other books, but have not been able to finish something yet. And honestly, right now, I'm so focused on getting to do things like this and share the book and really to hear from readers too, because I think that, when you think about authors you love, when I think about authors I love, I can think about really distinctive qualities of their voice. But this book, and I feel like I'm new to writing fiction. I'm very invested now. This is where I'm going professionally. And I feel like I wrote this for such an idiosyncratic reason. I'm still learning about writing fiction. So actually hearing from readers about what resonates with them is not necessarily steering me in terms of you should write this or this, but it's helping me see myself and my strengths so that I can figure out where I want to grow and where I want to take it next. I think there's no question that the zone of the very big tent I'm interested in is strong, smart women working together, and probably some crime. And so I think there will probably be ladies and dead bodies. This is a family story. I also, as I mentioned, have been a jock for a long time. I've had some incredibly and still have incredibly positive experiences playing women's sports. And I'm curious about doing something with a team of women in that way. I'm curious about sisters. I have a sister I love so much. I'm curious about professional teams of women, but just interested in, these opportunities to tell stories about women who are really working together and are confronted by extraordinary situations.
I know your work mostly from the nonfiction side.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of related to what you've just been saying. I'm wondering how your experiences in organizing your thoughts for those kinds of works have played in or not to what you've just done.
Well, and it's one of the things I loved learning about Diane is that you also have been in public health. I had a background in museums and in cultural nonprofits, and there's no question that there's a nonprofit in this book. It is not in the arts. It is a land trust. I love nature and the environment, and I wanted to play with some of the contradictions that I know so well in nonprofits, where you have wealthy donors and organizations of people who are do-gooders, but are they always doing good? But I wasn't ready to write something in a field like the arts that I know very well. It was sort of like moving it 30 minutes down the coast. It's like moving it to another nonprofit sector. I think that also having worked as a museum director with so many visual artists for so long, I know what it's like to partner with artists. And it's very interesting now for me working with a publisher and experiencing what it's like to be the creative in partnership with a machine. And I used to be in the machine seat, right? And so I think that also just as I'm learning this new industry and learning the commercial side of arts as opposed to nonprofit arts, there's just been a lot of discovery in a way that has been exciting for me. And I think that eventually there's got to be a museum book or, an arts book, but I'm not there yet. And I have thought, though, when I think about where are there smart, strong women where there could be a lot of crime, a symphony board, I think there's a lot of nonprofit boards where there are a lot of powerhouse women and a lot of potential for some bodies to hit the floor. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Well, I know the story to this, but I think it's really interesting. Everyone I've talked to about the book wants to know how the heck did you get an agent to take your book and to move on to those next steps, because it's very unusual.
I cold queried. I did, I didn't have connections in the publishing world. And I guess what I should also say, and it sort of relates to this thing about learning industry, I was really conscious that there was a time when we were doing an intimate creative project together that was about us. And then there was a time where I said, my mom was doing better. I was thinking about what I was going to do professionally next. I didn't want to get a job again where if something changed with my mom's health, I'd again want to quit, And so I was interested in seeing if I could pursue this. But there was a clear choice of, okay, we had a special project together, and now I'm going to see, could this become a product for a wider audience? Could it become something where I could work in an industry? What would that look like? And so, I read a lot, I listened to podcasts, and I sent these cold query emails to all these agents, and a lot of them rejected me. And then some of them said yes. And then I talked to a bunch of people about what their vision for the book was. And I'm so lucky that I ended up with a really fabulous agent, Stephanie Lieberman and Jane Glow Nesbitt, who really guided me through a lot of edits before we ever tried to sell the book. And I feel like I got almost like a mini MFA from learning from her through those edits, how to make the story more layered, more nuanced, and how to really make sure also that the family drama and the murder mystery both had prominence as opposed to it being one or the other. And so I feel like of all of the relationships I've had in publishing so far, my relationship with my agent is the most important to me, and I just feel so lucky to be with somebody who I really respect and trust, and who I feel like I learn from all the time. And so actually I now help out a lot of my friends who are in this area where they're writing books, they're trying to get agents, and often you can be so desperate that it's just like anybody who will take me, I will go with. And I feel so lucky to have been able to work with somebody who wasn't just willing to do this, but who was really able to be a great professional partner to me in making this book, possible to become what it is now. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to put this one, but usually I see things that is a very visual, but my friend and I, we do a lot of music. I do a lot of photography that's music related. But I'm just trying to think is there a certain kind of music that you would think of that you would hear, like if they're going to make this into a movie, and you would say, oh my God, they're doing the whole thing as a rock opera. I hate that. Is there something that you could, like a certain kind of music that you think would really kind of go along with it?
I actually made a Spotify playlist that I'll share that's the Lana Rubicon Power Mix. So it's sort of thinking of who this woman is. It's funny. I don't have a musical reaction in that way. But I will say that visually, and I think that a lot of this actually comes from having been an athlete for so long, I not only really see what's going on, but there's a lot for me that's about the blocking of where people are relative to each other. And, in any mystery, you have to have some action elements. And also, this is a book where in most cases, there are multiple people in every given scene, working things out with each other. And so I would say that there was a lot more embodied experience for me in writing it than it was oral. And so certainly I was seeing things, but also I was often kind of physically moving myself into where the story was going.
I have a
question with character development. So one of the moments that I fell in love with Lana or admired her, I guess, is that part where she's waiting for Jack's boss to come pick her up, and she goes and he like honks the door or knocks somewhere, and she won't get in the car until he gets out and like comes and picks her up.
Yep.
I took notes for my future page.
Nice.
But that was like such a fun scene
Yeah.
that made you like encompass her personality, but you admired how strong and powerful she was, and
Yeah.
then she turned the term on all that. When you're doing those and uncovering your characters and introducing us to them in that way, is that strategic that you're placing those moments, or when you write, does that just kind of flow and you're like, this is exactly how she would handle this, and it just happens naturally for you?
Great question. I think that it can be some of both. And one thing I'd say is my mom and I spent a long time before I ever wrote just talking about these characters and who they were. And to be honest, I felt quite embarrassed during that time because I was like, how could I say that I'm writing when I actually haven't written anything? But because we spent so much time chatting about these people, and she'd call me, she'd say, "Oh, I had a Lana moment," or "Oh, this person, I thought of this." It made it so that, particularly with that character, but to some extent with all three of the women, I knew how they would show up in a scene. And so if I had a scene goal, like for example, for her to go with Paul to the marina, I had a sense of, well, how would Lana do that, and how would it be different from how Beth would do it? I did actually do some exercises early where I would, from all three of the women's perspective, these are not in the book, but I would say, okay, let me write from each of their perspective the first time they saw the house where Beth lives. And not just how do they see it in terms of how would they describe it, but even also thinking about how am I writing those sentences? Again, like with Beth being romantic, if you look at her chapters, there's a lot more lyrical language, and it's not overt necessarily, but it was part of how I was thinking about how I developed those characters and how I'm strategically doing it. I'll also say that there's some characters like Lana who I just knew and so deeply loved from the beginning of writing this that I felt like I could do that. There were characters like Beth was one where I really had to learn to love her over multiple drafts. And so I feel like I wasn't able to do that as well in the beginning as I could with Lana. And so I think that, what I learned, and I don't know if this has been your experience, is that it wasn't, for me at least, enough to just know who this character was. It wasn't until I really loved the character that I felt like I could write them fully. And it's funny because Lana is not entirely a likable person, but I think since I have so much love for that character, it makes her somebody who you can get behind, even if she's got a lot of rough edges.
Is that true for you too? Very, very similar. My goal for the summer was to, get halfway through a draft of my next book, but I, fell into the rabbit hole of research and really thinking about my characters. And now I do feel a lot more ready to write them because I know them so well. So I will, if somebody was to pick up one of my characters, I know exactly what their approach would be because I've kind of let them settle into my soul a little bit. So yeah,
That's
very
very
much.
good. Yes.
Yeah, as it's a first fiction novel, now you fall in love with these characters, you create these characters. Is the temptation to make the next book, take them to another place, or do you just scrap it all and start again with a whole new family and a whole new relationships? And
Yeah.
as I see so many fiction writers get these recurring characters that they kind of move from place to place.
Yeah.
And I would think when you've invested so much in these characters, do you take it to that next level where Jack goes to college and
Sure. Well, and then obviously murder mysteries are a genre. Certainly a lot of the writers I love to read, they're writing series that are, 20 books deep. And I think that I'm really of two minds of it. On the one hand, I love these characters. There are more adventures I'd love to take them on. I do not live by the ocean. I live in the Santa Cruz Mountains, off the grid, in a cabin in the woods with a bunch of hippies. And I would love to send Lana to a commune and see what but on the other hand,
That might be the mystery.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. On the other hand, I did write this for an idiosyncratic and very personal reason, and it was a book of discovery for me around writing fiction. And so I feel like there are so many different stories I'm now curious about writing, so many different kinds of characters I'm curious about writing. And so I think that, if there's huge reader response, and if my publisher says, hey, we'd really love to see more books with these women, I would be excited to tell those stories. But at least for right now, I feel like I'm trying to like learn and grow as a writer by trying to explore what does it look like to create other kinds of people and other kinds of worlds. Yes.
Do you see yourself writing with a male lead character?
You know, maybe someday, and it's funny, you know, because this is a book about three generations of women, and I always feel a little sheepish that it erases my mom's wonderful boyfriend Bill and my wonderful husband Sibley, you know, from the equation. But I think that I don't know. I have so much passion and identification with women who are, you know, not just strong in themselves, but supporting each other. I mean, I guess I feel like a lot of books I read about groups of women, there is often the sense that there's, you know, one powerhouse and then the other women who are the queen bee and her followers or the antagonist. And I feel like my life is full of so many kick-ass women who are supporting each other. And I think that I don't see those stories as often as I would like to. And you know, there are a couple of male kind of sidekick characters in this book, and I feel like I'd be happy to write some more male sidekicks. I like writing men against them, but that's not, at least for now, where my energy is going. Yeah. Do you have any more questions? Yes.
Was Mother Mother Murder Night always the title you had in mind?
No, and it's one of the many examples of how fabulous my agent is. My agent invented this title. We had a huge war about the hyphen, which she won, and it's fine. It was heated. And no, I had terrible titles at first. I don't know if you read murder mysteries, but murder mysteries often have kind of terrible titles. And recently, we're kind of in this resurgence of some good titles, you know. And but when I was actually looking at my shelf for inspiration, they were all really not good. I will say the women, the family at the center of this book, the last name is Rubicon, and I have a whole imagined story about why they went from being Rabikovs to being Rubicons, as a lot of Jewish names get anglicized. But I also was interested in this idea about crossing the Rubicon and that Lana is making this change. And so I had many titles that involved the Rubicon, but they just sounded like very heavy. I loved the title Ms. Murder, but my agent Gabrielle said that sounds like you wrote this book in 1995. And so when my agent came up with this title, we were both thrilled with it. Yeah. Well, thank you, Diane, so much.
Thank you. Congratulations.
But the counter mic back there can help everyone out, and then you guys can either sit here on these chairs or sit on the couch to sign. And we're gonna form a line. I've posted them so that everyone can write their names on. Yeah.
Great. All right. People should buy a book first.
Yes.
Okay.
This
Great.
slide.
Yeah. Do you want to sit here or do you want to sit on the couch? Yeah. We'll switch to the couch. It's a little easier.